Princess and didn't wait for headlines. The moment she caught wind of staff defying Catherine's directives during a private, emotionally loaded ceremony, she moved. Behind the scenes, the Princess Royal suspended those involved and began asking questions no one else dared voice. This wasn't just about protocol. It was about respect, and about recognizing growing tide of defiance aimed squarely at Catherine. With Queen Camilla's discreet yet persistent power networks looming in the background, Anne's response was a clear line in the sand. Loyalty isn't optional. If you love getting the real story behind the palace walls, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and tap the notification bell so you never miss an update. What unfolded wasn't just a disciplinary action, it was a revelation. The monarchy's internal walls are thinner than ever, with silent dissent becoming a language of its own. This was a strategic disruption, and Anne's reaction marked a deeper understanding that if these cracks aren't sealed now, the entire structure could shift. The monarchy's future isn't just about public opinion or pageantry. It hinges on who controls the silence within. Of all the things that could have fractured the palace from the inside, no one expected it to start with a private, sacred ceremony. No cameras, no fanfare, just Catherine, the Princess of Wales, marking a personal moment meant for reflection. A moment that should have been protected, honored, and carried out with precision. Instead, it was deliberately derailed. This wasn't some logistical mix-up or a case of palace miscommunication. This was quiet sabotage. Staff members who received clear instructions from Catherine ignored them. Protocols were broken. Key ceremonial elements were omitted or altered. The dignity of the moment was compromised, and not by accident. That's what changed the tone entirely. What could have passed as negligence instantly became something darker, calculated resistance from within. And when word of it reached Princess Anne, the reaction was instant. And didn't wait. She didn't ask for reports or form a polite internal committee. She suspended the maids involved, swiftly and without apology. Because when you've seen the kind of behind-the-scenes dysfunction she has, you know exactly how dangerous internal rebellion can be. Especially when it's this quiet. Especially when it's this personal. What this exposed is something no press office can spin away. That staff within the royal household feel emboldened to challenge Catherine's authority. Not publicly, not loudly, but in subtle, insidious ways. The kind of act that sent a message while offering just enough deniability to avoid being caught outright. But this time, they were caught. Anne if you love getting the real story behind the palace walls, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and tap the notification bell so you never miss an update. This incident wasn't just about a ceremony. It was about control, about which royal staff are still taking seriously behind closed doors. And more importantly, about which ones they are quietly trying to undermine. Catherine didn't lose her temper. She didn't go to the press. She stuck to form, composed, quiet, and dignified. But make no mistake, this was a personal violation, and one that left its mark. What makes it worse is the underlying motive. Catherine's influence is growing. Her visibility, her role, her proximity to the crown. And that's shaken up the internal balance of power in a way that hasn't been fully reckoned with. The royal family doesn't operate on titles alone. It operates on trust, legacy, and unspoken alliances. And some of those alliances still orbit around Queen Camilla. Camilla's rise through the royal ranks wasn't easy. Her power was slowly and deliberately built over time, especially after marrying into a position of influence. And while she may not speak loudly in public, behind the scenes, she has a loyal network. Staff members who see her as the heart of the traditional monarchy, who may view Catherine as too new, too reformist, or too popular for comfort. That's attention. That's the context. Because if these rebellious acts weren't isolated incidents, and Anne's reaction suggests they weren't, then this wasn't just disobedience. This was part of a deeper rift between the old guard and the new, between those resisting Catherine's rise and those trying to protect the current order. That's why the ceremony mattered. Not just for what it was, but for what it revealed. A moment of personal grief or reflection became the stage for a power play. And when staff chose to ignore Catherine's wishes during that moment, they weren't just undermining a princess. They were drawing lines. Anne's decision to suspend them wasn't only about punishing disrespect. It was about protecting the institution from internal rot. Because when people inside the palace start choosing who they listen to based on politics, not position, the structure begins to crumble. And there's a pattern here. This isn't the first time a woman entering royal ranks has faced quiet resistance. Diana experienced it. So did others who didn't come from within the inner royal circle. There's a long history of internal pushback when someone new becomes too influential, too beloved by the public, or too modern for the palace's taste. But where others before were isolated or left to fend for themselves, Catherine has an advantage. She is Princess Anne. Anne's loyalty to the crown is non-negotiable. She doesn't pick side for sport. She acts in defense of the monarchy itself. So when she steps in, it signals that the problem isn't just interpersonal. It's institutional. She saw a fracture in the palace's operational loyalty and acted before it spread any further. Still, the fact that this was necessary at all speaks volumes. The monarchy is supposed to function like a well-oiled machine. Private ceremonies should be the last place you'd see signs of internal discontent. And yet, even there, rebellion seeped in. Small acts of defiance. Staff willing to risk exposure just to send a signal that Catherine's authority is not universally recognized. That's not something you can fix with a memo. It shows a fundamental instability at the heart of the institution, one that's been ignored, downplayed, or politely covered up. But this time, it couldn't be hidden. The act was too specific, the moment too sacred, Annen's reaction too immediate to suggest anything other than full-on internal concern. Now, the palace is left to clean up the fallout. Internally, investigations are underway. Not just about who acted out, but about why they felt empowered to do so. What circles of influence allowed this insubordination to take root? Who else is part of the silent resistance? And how far up do those connections go? These aren't rhetorical questions. They are urgent, because if Catherine's authority can be challenged like this, the message it sends is devastating. It tells every future senior royal that their power is only as strong as the loyalty they can command behind closed doors. And it tells staff that there's room, maybe even protection, for disobedience if they align with the right person. That's how dysfunction becomes embedded. So what now? The real challenge isn't removing a few disloyal staff. It's re-establishing control, rebuilding trust, and, most importantly, addressing the fractures that allowed this act of sabotage to happen in the first place. That's not going to be easy, because power in the palace is quiet, complicated, and deeply personal. And as for Catherine, this moment may have rattled her, but it didn't break her. Her silence, as always, speaks louder than the whispers. But she won't forget this, because how could she? When the very people tasked with protecting her dignity use her vulnerability as an opportunity to strike. She knows now exactly what she's up against. Not public opinion, not the media, but the institution itself, and the people inside it who still believe they can control who rises, and who doesn't. If you've been following this closely, you already know this isn't about one ceremony. This is about the future of the monarchy, about whether loyalty can be enforced when influence is shifting, and whether a family known for its silence can survive the noise building behind palace walls. Thanks for watching. If you're as stunned by this as we are, hit that like button, share this with someone who's still clinging to the image of a united royal front, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Catherine will come out stronger after this? Or is this the start of deeper trouble? Make sure to subscribe, because if this is what they tried to keep quiet, imagine what's still coming. The truth is, what we just witnessed wasn't just disrespect. It was a message that even now, with Catherine stepping deeper into her role as a future queen, there are still people inside the royal household who do not see her as someone to follow. And what's worse, they are bold enough to show it, not with open confrontation, not with direct disloyalty, but with a kind of passive sabotage that is far more dangerous. The kind that happens in whispers, in missing items, in forgotten responsibilities. The kind that chips away at trust, protocol, and power until you're left questioning whether you were ever in control at all. Catherine has never been one to chase power for show. She doesn't operate through leaks, tantrums, or behind-the-scenes chaos. But her influence is real. It's growing. Her image with the public is more solid than ever. She's respected. She's admired. She's seen as a future. And all of that has made her a threat. Because inside the palace, not everyone wants a future. There are people who like the old order, who benefited from it, who feel safe with the traditional hierarchy, and that hierarchy never included Catherine at the top. It was Camilla's name they served, Camilla's directives they followed, and Camilla's quiet presence they supported. That dynamic didn't dissolve just because public favor shifted. And now, Catherine's authority is being tested, not with overt challenges, but with subtle defiance. The ceremony, as small and private as it may have seemed, was a perfect battleground. No press, no public eyes, just Catherine, her instructions, and the people around her who were supposed to carry them out. And when they didn't, that wasn't a fluke. That was an internal referendum on her authority. Princess Anne saw that immediately. She's been in the royal machine long enough to recognize the signs. She's seen what happens when the internal structure begins to turn on itself. So she did what no one else seemed willing to do. She enforced consequences. Swiftly. Publicly. And not just for show, but because she knew if this was allowed to slide, the message would be devastating. That Catherine could be disobeyed without punishment. That loyalty was optional. That quiet insubordination was just part of the palace game. Anne's actions weren't just protective, they were preventative. Because he understands exactly what's at stake. If the monarchy loses its internal discipline, if the staff begin picking and choosing which royals to respect, then the system itself starts to collapse. Titles become meaningless. Traditions start to hollow out. And what you're left with is spectacle, not substance. That's a crisis quietly unfolding behind the royal gates right now. This isn't about a single act of sabotage. It's about what it represents, a fracture in the royal household that can no longer be hidden behind stiff upper lips and carefully posed portraits. Let's be clear, Catherine didn't ask for this conflict. She didn't provoke it, but her growing power, her connection with the public, her position in line, that is what some inside the palace want to push back against. And when they couldn't challenge her openly, they found the one moment she couldn't fight back, a sacred ceremony meant for reflection. They took that moment from her, not in a dramatic way, not with confrontation, but with precision, with cold, calculated silence. And they sent a clear message: you are not untouchable. But here's what they didn't expect. That Princess Anne would stand up not just for Catherine, but for the principle of order. That she would see this quiet act of defiance as a threat not just to one royal, but to the entire institution, and that she would act without hesitation. This wasn't just discipline. It was a declaration. Loyalty is not a suggestion, and disloyalty, even in silence, will not be tolerated. The investigation that followed isn't just about those few maids. It's about the entire staff culture inside the palace. Who else knew? Who encouraged it? Who quietly supported the defiance but kept their hands clean? Those are the questions being asked now. Because in royal politics, silence is never neutral. If you didn't stop the sabotage, you were part of it. That's the environment inside the palace post-incident. Nervous, suspicious, watching. The illusion of a united front has cracked. And what's pouring through that crack is a truth everyone was too polite to say out loud. The internal loyalty lines are broken. Catherine is rising, and not everyone inside wants her to. The fallout has already begun. Staff are religning. Conversations that used to happen in the open are now taking place in hushed corners. Everyone is wondering, who else is quietly choosing sides? Who's next? Because Anne's response didn't just end the sabotage. It exposed it. And once something is exposed, you can't pretend it doesn't exist. The royal family now has a decision to make. Do they confront the fracture? Or do they pretend it's already been fixed with a few suspensions and a quiet memo? Because if they go with the second option, this will happen again. And next time, it might not be during a private moment. Next time, it could unfold on a much bigger stage, during a public event, a state occasion, something that cannot be contained behind palace walls. And when that happens, the consequences won't just be personal. They'll be constitutional. Because a monarchy that cannot manage its internal discipline is one step away from public collapse. Catherine knows that now, and always did. And the rest of the royal family? They are being forced to learn it the hard way. This isn't just about royal etiquette or minor rebellion. It's about an institution that is being tested from within, by the people who were supposed to protect it. And the part that should really make everyone pause? It's that this isn't the kind of scandal that ends with an apology or a quiet reassignment. Because this wasn't public-facing. It wasn't performative. It was internal, designed, executed, and felt only by those within the royal circle. That's exactly why it matters. Because what we're looking at here is not just some rebellious staff moment or behind-the-scenes blip in protocol. This was an internal declaration that, beneath all the royal choreography, something fundamental is unraveling. And it's not just about Catherine. It's about who holds power now and who's fighting to keep it. So let's not pretend the monarchy hasn't seen its share of chaos. Public outcry, scandal, divorce, departures. They've weathered it all. But what's happening now is different. This isn't chaos brought in from the outside. This is a self-inflicted wound, wrapped in palace curtains and swept under antique rugs. Catherine's ceremony, whatever the exact nature, was meant to be small, private, a moment of emotional weight. Whether it was grief, commemoration, or spiritual reflection, it was sacred and intentionally shielded from the public eye, which is exactly why those who chose to sabotage it felt bold enough to do so. No cameras, no press coverage, no accountability, or so they thought. But what they underestimated was Princess Anne. Because and as always played by her own rules, loyal to the crown, immune to palace drama, and completely uninterested in appeasing royal politics. And when something threatens the order and integrity of the system, she doesn't talk about it. She acts. So the staff involved, suspended, immediately. And that immediate response did two things. First, it stopped the bleeding, for now. Second, and more importantly, it forced everyone inside the palace to confront what they've been avoiding. There are factions in the royal household. There are staff whose loyalty no longer aligns with the crown as it stands today. There are networks of quiet defiance operating just beneath the surface. And now, they're no longer invisible. Catherine's growing role as a future queen is not just a ceremonial shift. It's a generational power transfer. And to some, that's threatening. Because while the public may see her as graceful, steady, and modern, not everyone inside the palace agrees. There are those who still see her as a newcomer, someone who wasn't born into it, someone who's too aligned with change. And change, for the old guard, is terrifying, which is where Queen Camilla comes back into the equation. No, she wasn't directly involved. There's no proof she issued any order or gave a knowing nod. But her influence, her legacy of palace relationships, still casts a long shadow. Many of the most loyal senior staff today came up under her reign. They serve her memory, her preferences, and her style of leadership. And when Catherine's approach doesn't align with that, they resist, quietly, subtly. That's why this wasn't a clumsy mistake. It was strategic. Because internal sabotage doesn't require dramatic gestures. It just needs people who feel protected. And now we know they did feel protected. Until and snap that illusion in half. But let's be honest. A few suspensions aren't going to fix this. The damage is already done. Catherine now knows that her own household is divided. That her power isn't fully recognized behind palace walls. That her instructions, no matter how carefully or respectfully given, can be ignored if someone feels brave enough. And that changes everything. From now on, every interaction will be different. Every event will carry tension. Every staff meeting will come with a quiet layer of mistrust. Because once that line is crossed, once someone violates a moment of emotional privacy, the game is no longer polite. It becomes survival. This is how royal power really works. Not through speeches or balcony waves, but through loyalty, through silent signals, through who follows your orders without needing to be told twice. And if that breaks down, so does everything else. What's worse is that the monarchy depends on this illusion of order. The public has to believe that behind those gates, everything runs like clockwork, that tradition is upheld, that hierarchy is respected, and that royal dignity is never compromised. But now, that illusion is cracked. Not publicly, not scandalously, but internally, which is far more serious. Because when you lose order on the inside, no amount of polished public appearances can save you. And that's exactly the tightrope Catherine is walking now. She can't lash out. She can't make public demands. She has to carry herself with the same calm, composed elegance that people expect from her. But behind the scenes, she's been reminded, in the most personal, painful way possible, that not everyone in that palace wants her to succeed. And the question is, what happens next? Do more staff get removed? Do deeper investigations follow? Does this loyalty fracture spread into other departments? Because if it does, if more quiet rebellion takes root, then this isn't just a one-off scandal. It's a constitutional warning flare that the system built on centuries of loyalty, hierarchy, and respect is starting to splinter. Anne's intervention may have stopped one act of sabotage, but it also exposed the battlefield. And now, the entire institution is on notice. Catherine didn't ask for this war, but now that it's begun, she'll have to navigate it like every strong woman who came before her, with restraint, awareness, and a new understanding of just how deep the politics of palace life run. If Diana taught the world anything, it's that royal silence can be a double-edged sword. But Catherine isn't Diana. She plays the long game. And now, she's playing it with her eyes open. The ceremony? It was meant to be sacred. Instead, it turned into a cold, calculated warning shot. And thanks to Anne, that shot didn't go unanswered. If you've been watching the monarchy long enough, you know what this means. There's more coming. Power doesn't shift quietly. And when it does, those who feel it slipping through their fingers will always try to pull something. So keep watching, because the surface might still look calm, but underneath it, the palace is shaking. Let us know what you think in the comments. Was this rebellion a one-time defiance or the start of a wider pattern? Like this video if you're following the palace unraveling as closely as we are. Share it with someone who still thinks the monarchy is all tea and tradition. And don't forget to subscribe, because if this is what's happening in private, just wait until it spills into public view.